Okay, we are now recording. Okay, well, like I said, welcome to biology. I hope it took a few minutes for yourselves just to kind of take a quick mental break before we jump back in. It's your last core class. We're almost there, but we got to push to the end here. So, you'll notice that our objective for today, describe and compare and contrast kingdoms in the domain bacteria and Archaebacteria and Protista. So the reason I wanted to include archaea and bacteria is because protists are unicellular eukaryotes, so they're very different from bacteria and archaea. So I want to make sure that we're figuring out the differences between them. Fungi was really quick last week because it's not super heavily covered on the star, and I didn't want to weigh you down too much with information. But there is a chance that stuff like that can come up. Damien, if you continue to unmute yourself, you will be kicked from this meeting. This is your first warning. Okay, so also make sure that you assign yourself in your planner, 8.1 review questions. We've got a whole bunch of things to do there. All right, let's get to it. Here is our thinking task. What do all of these things have in common? I'm going to give you 3 minutes. I want you to look through these. If you don't know what something is, for example, the potato famine, maybe you've never heard of it, or malaria, whatever, take a few minutes. You got 3 minutes to look it up. Start figuring out what it is that connects all of these things together. So again, 3 minutes. This is your due now. Put your answers in the chat. Oh, actually, you can't hear it. So let me make sure that you can hear this. Include system audio. Okay. All right, good job, Hamza. Nice slide design. Thank you, Brayton. Thank you, Caleb. Thank you, Miguel. Thank you, Kaylee. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, Clint. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Miguel. Thank you, Zaria. A few more seconds. Eileen. Okay, so I saw a lot of people say stuff about being harmful, which is true, but if you look in the bottom right, we see toothpaste, right? Toothpaste is probably kind of the opposite of that. I guess you could argue maybe that the toothpaste tube is bad for the environment, but the picture is trying to get at toothpaste itself. Okay, Alan, thank you. Yeah, so a lot of these things you can see cause harm, with the exception of maybe toothpaste, because that's actually something that helps us. But yeah, you all included on the answer pretty quickly that these have a lot to do with infectious diseases. The thing that ties them all together is going to be protists, which is what we're talking about today. Now, the reason we want to devote a little bit of time to protists is because you might not super understand what protists are, even though they have a huge effect on our entire world. So you'll see the potato famine we're going to talk a little bit more about later. Very important. Algal blooms. These are all caused by protists. So we're going to move on to our PowerPoint. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to start sharing this. So, protists. The star knows that protists are not super, what's happening? Not super understood by a lot of students, so they will ask some kind of clarifying questions to make sure that you understand how protists are different from bacteria or fungi. Oh, this is not going to work, is it? So the important thing to understand is that protists, like I said earlier, they are unicellular eukaryotes. So why I mentioned that is because last week we talked about bacteria and archaea. Those were prokaryotic unicellular organisms. So just like bacteria, protists only are one cell. They're not going to be like people. They're not made of a whole bunch of different cells. But let's see, Frankie, shall I show you out here? Because I can't understand you very well. I'm sorry, Frankie. Thankfully, these are going to be recorded, so as long as you're following along, you can be able to hear me later. But yeah, thank you. So, protists. They come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. They're actually really cool to look at. We're going to do a virtual lab here at the end of class that I wish we would have been able to do in person, but we'll talk more about that when we get to it. Okay, so the general characteristics. Can I get someone to come off mute and read that?
And any organism not classified as a plant, animal, fungi, or bacteria is a prokaryote.
Very good, thank you. So like I was saying, if it's not classified as a plant or an animal or a fungus or a bacteria, that is generally a protist. So it's kind of like the mishmash category. They are specifically unicellular eukaryotes, but they do have a lot of characteristics that are shared with plants, animals, fungi, and bacteria. Thank you. And the second one was protists are eukaryotic, having a distinct nucleus and organelles. And then can I get someone to read the last one?
Yeah. Most protists are unicellular or one-celled, but some are multicellular.
Okay, thank you. So later on when we see like those algae, like you'll see like they kind of look like seaweed, but the difference is that they're not like it's not like they have a whole bunch of functioning organs. They're just a whole bunch of cells kind of put together. But again, we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Okay, protists are primarily classified according to how they obtain nutrition. So you have animal-like heterotrophs, and plant-like autotrophs, and fungus-like decomposers heterotrophs. So I hope that you remember last week when we talked about fungi a little bit. The one thing that was important with fungi is that they are heterotrophic. They don't generate their own energy like plants. They have to grow on things. So if there's something dead in the woods, right, you'll find like mold and mushrooms growing on it. It needs living tissue to thrive, or not living tissue, but it needs some kind of tissue to thrive. It doesn't make leaves, so it doesn't produce photosynthesis or anything like that. So animal-like protists, heterotrophs, mean that they have to eat stuff. They have to consume other organisms. So you'll see here that we got one of these protists called a didinium eating a paramecium. Paramecium are pretty common. When you ever get sick, that's usually the cause of one of these guys. We'll talk more about that in a second. Plant-like autotrophs, they contain chloroplasts and make their own food, so they're photosynthetic. So you'll see this one, which is a euglena, this one produces its own food. So unlike bacteria, unlike fungi, right, they're like plants. They can make their own food. It stains green because it has those chloroplasts and that chlorophyll, which is what generates the photosynthesis. And then finally, fungus-like, decomposers. So even though they're not mushrooms per se, they are unicellular decomposers. So whenever you find like, if you go to the lake and you find like fuzzy stuff in the lake, those are usually these water molds. I think they're called like mycota, something like that. This is a scientific name. But they're basically, if mushrooms were compressed down to like one cell, they grow on things that are alive. So even though you might not think about it, lakes are full of like, poop, right? Like if there's fish in the lakes don't generally feed into anything else. They're self-contained. So there's no movement in the water. So things start to grow in the water because this is all this decomposing material. So all the dead fish, all their poop, all the stuff that's inside the lake, these I guess they are parasites, but these protists start to grow on all of that matter. Okay, so the animal-like ones. These are called protozoans. You notice the cilia, which hopefully look familiar to you. It's kind of how they move. And then here we've got something called pseudopods. This is an amoeba. So you might have heard amoeba like amoeba sisters before. It's basically like a big like blob, and it kind of just moves by like throwing itself. So a lot of this vocabulary is important. So for example, cilia, you're going to see a whole bunch, so make sure that you are paying attention to that. Pseudopods, not as important, like you might not see that on the star, but basically what it means is false feet, right? So pseudo means false, and then pod is foot. And then cytoplasm is the stuff that's inside a cell, which we'll talk more about when we get to cells. I was trying to load in GIFs to show you how they move around because it is pretty cool, but it didn't work. So these are the animal-like methods of movements. Paramecium. Like I said, these are pretty common. I mentioned lakes and rivers. Specifically, when it comes to lakes, you're going to find a whole lot of these things. Whenever you go to the lake and you swim and you get like really, really bad diarrhea, almost always it's because of one of these guys. So what happens is you might not be aware of it, but let's say that you accidentally drink some of the lake water, or if you have a cut on your skin, it can get through in there. So it's these little, tiny little barely even visible. Like you can't see them with the naked eye. You have to have a microscope. But they'll get inside you and they'll make you real sick. Almost always these things cause diarrhea. So it's called like giardia. It's real bad. But it's usually from contaminated water. What happens is it's not pleasant to think about, but we as humans get rid of a lot of waste, right? Usually through urine and feces. What happens in a lake is that if people go into the lake and they're doing their business in a lake, it's dirty, right? There's bacteria inside your body that are going to be then pushed out into the lake. So that bacteria combined with that poop provides a really, really nice environment for these protists to come around and start feeding on it. So then you get all these protists getting around and multiplying, and then before you know it, the lake is just full of all these parasites and protists. So this is what they look like under the microscope. Some of these have been stained so that you can see their organelles a little bit better, but for the most part, they look more like this, like they're clear. They're almost imperceptible, even under a microscope. But they have their own internal organs. So like you can see the nucleus, the cilia helps move around. This contractile vacuole kind of helps them retain or get rid of water depending on temperature. So it is pretty interesting. And of course, the cell membrane that surrounds everything. The oral groove, I don't expect for you to ever see on a star, but it's basically its mouth. It's how it eats stuff. Like I said, amoebas have these pseudopods that help them kind of move around. They also have the contractile vacuole because it's to help them maintain internal homeostasis. Because if it gets too hot, they'll shrivel, and if it gets too cold, then I think they'll explode. But we'll talk more about that when we talk about cell transport. But yeah, this is what the amoeba looks like. It looks like something out of like a science fiction movie. It really just kind of like stretches out and tries to find whatever it can bring into itself to eat. It's pretty crazy. All right, so like you included on the do now, they can be very, very harmful. So you might be wondering why mosquitoes are so bad, right? Of course, the bites are itchy and terrible, but the reason that they're terrible is because of this plasmodium. So the plasmodium is a protist. So even though you might not think about it, like we have E. coli inside of our digestive system, these mosquitoes have their own version of that. They have their own protists inside of them. So E. coli is bacteria. But these plasmodium parasites are inside the mosquitoes, and so they're transferred by the bite. So whenever the mosquito goes in to bite, it's not necessarily trying to inject any kind of parasite into you, but it does because it has its own parasites. It's like if you get bitten by a dog that has rabies, right? The dog that has rabies is not trying to give you rabies. The dog is just crazy and he's going to attack you. But because he attacks you, you get that infection. So it's the same thing with these mosquitoes. What they do is that when they're drinking the blood, because blood has like fat and stuff in it, sugar that they want, what comes out of their nose at the same time that it's feeding are these parasites, these plasmodiums. Specifically, there's one called trypanosoma that can cause sleeping sickness. It's not necessarily transferred by a mosquito, but it's by the tsetse fly. And what happens is when you get infected by that, you basically enter into a coma and you'll never wake up from it. So even though these things are very, very small, they have a huge effect on us. I hope that as we go through the course of this year, you'll understand that even though we look at the world around us, we see these cars and buildings and people, we share the planet with these microorganisms that you never even really think about, and yet they can cause huge damage to you personally and even on a global scale, like with what's happening right now with COVID, which is a virus. The virus is interesting because it's just a piece of genetic material. When it comes to these parasites, they are actual organisms. They have their own free will. They'll do whatever they want to do. Like I said, when you go to a lake, they will purposefully seek you out. It's not like a virus where, somebody coughs and you breathe it in. That's dangerous and scary. But there's also these other organisms that exist alongside you that are their own free agents. It's pretty interesting and also a little scary. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that everything has to be scary all the time. Like I said, they can be good and bad just like bacteria. For the most part, sometimes they recycle nutrients to break down matter. They're a food source for other organisms, and they can also be mutualistic, which means that both organisms benefit from their presence. So, for example, trichonifoma, I don't even know how to say that, makes it possible for termites to eat wood. So, in the same way that we have like a lactose intolerance, like some people can't drink milk, there's bacteria inside you that can help you digest the milk. At least it did over time, and we've developed genes for it. But this specifically for termites is an organism that lives inside the termite that allows it to digest wood, right? We can't eat wood. Like if you try to eat wood, you just see it in your poop. It'd be very, very painful to push out, but it's hypothetically possible. It's why you don't eat plants for the most part, right? Like when you see cows going outside and eat a bunch of grass, we don't do that because we don't get any nutrition from it. That doesn't mean there isn't any nutrition there. We just don't have the tools to digest it. So this organism that's inside the termite allows it to be able to eat wood, which is pretty interesting. So the termite itself doesn't eat wood. There's something inside the termite that eats the wood and then passes on the nutrients to the host organism. That's called mutualism because they both benefit. And as you can see, they are pretty interesting to look at. I think it's a little spooky. Sometimes it reminds me of like a sci-fi movie. Like the most craziest thing you can do is you go to the pond, collect some water, look at it under a microscope, and you'll be surprised at the microbial life that exists. The things that you're swimming with whenever you go inner tubing or water skiing, there are these creatures inside the water that you're not really even aware of. Okay, plant-like protists. So you're not going to see a whole lot of these on the star. They like to focus on the ones that cause infection, like I showed you earlier. But there are protists that are able to produce their own energy. So this is the euglena, like I mentioned earlier. This can sense light. So like I said, these are a lot closer to living than you might think. So they can detect light. They can see things. They can move around with the flagella. The contractile vacuole regulates water coming in and out. The chloroplasts, like I mentioned, are what control photosynthesis, which is what we're going to see in plants. And this is not as important, but I just wanted to show you in case it does come up. So phytoplankton provides a source of nourishment for other organisms. So basically, these things draw energy from the sun because they're not really moving, right? They're just kind of there in the water. So they generate energy, they make sugar, and then they're eaten by like fish. They're also helpful to recycle sewage and waste materials inside the water. So like I mentioned, fish are constantly pooping and dying. So there are protists there that can help break down those things so that it's not just a huge giant mess. But that can lead to these things like you'll see here, which are algal blooms. So that's what happens when it goes out of control. So they're harmful when overgrown, deplete water of nutrients, consequently killing fish. So what happens is they just kind of reproduce out of control. Like if it's not being well regulated, then they'll just start eating and eating and eating, and before you know it, it's almost like taking over the entire water. So this is not a photoshopped image. This is what it looks like. You'll see there's some places where there's tropical fish that can get to this level. I think this happens pretty regularly along the Gulf Coast and in Florida. So you'll see these red tides, and they're pretty crazy. All right, I'm going to skip most of this because this is not important for the star. I just wanted to show you so that if you've ever gone to the ocean or swimming and fishing, you might have seen stuff like this. These are examples of algae. It's a good food source, photosynthesis, and we eat it a lot. Okay, fungus like protists. So again, these are things that are acting like fungus, which means they don't act like plants. They don't make their own food. They grow on things. Slime molds are pretty common. Water molds, like I said, you'll find those pretty much everywhere. The reason they're important is because they can be beneficial. Like I said, that they recycle dead organic material, which results in more fertile soil. The problem is that even though it's good for recycling dead material, we are not dead, right? You don't want to ingest those things because they're going to start to eat you, and that's what makes you sick. They can also be harmful to, what's it called? Sharecropping or like farming, right? So, for example, there's something called the Great Potato Famine, and I think I saw that Clint knew something about it. Clint, would you mind coming off mute real quick to tell us what you know about the famine? Let me see if I can find his message. Oh, my phone froze. Okay, well, we're going to watch a video here about the potato famine here in a second. I just wanted to see what he knew. But basically what happened was there was this pest that grew on the potatoes. The reason it's important for Ireland is because it was a big part of their economy. So everybody grew potatoes and then everybody ate potatoes. So if the potato goes away, it crashed the entire economy. This happened back in like the 1800s. So let's watch a video about the potato famine because I think it is important. Stop sharing. And it's on PowerPoint slide. Okay, so I pulled this up from, I think, Britannica.
In the fall of 1845, potato plants in fields across Ireland started turning black and rotten. The potato crop failure was even greater the next year, and for the 3 years after that. Crop failure is a hardship, but for the Irish people, it was devastating. In Ireland, these years became known as An Gorta Mór, or the Great Hunger. From 1845 to 1849, Ireland's potato crop was ruined by late blight, a disease that destroys both the leaves and the edible roots of the potato plant. Many Irish peasants relied on potato farming for their main source of food and income. Without the potato, they had little food to eat and no money to pay their rent. So great numbers of the Irish poor found themselves hungry and homeless. Across Ireland, famine became widespread, and the Irish people suffered great horrors during this time. Many people died of starvation. Soup kitchens provided limited food rations and cornmeal was imported, but this was not enough to prevent malnutrition. Weakened from hunger, people could not fight off disease, causing more deaths. Families rarely could afford coffins for those they lost. Relief came slowly. Ireland was ruled by Great Britain, and for the majority of the famine, Great Britain was led by a prime minister who believed that the government should interfere as little as possible in the economy. This meant that aid efforts fell primarily on the shoulders of the people. Irish landowners initially helped their tenants, but without rent coming in, they could not continue this for long. Private groups from other countries were moved by the plight of the starving Irish people and tried to help. Relief money came from England, India, Australia, and the United States. The Choctaw Nation sent $170, a considerable amount of money at the time. The Choctaw people had been among the first American Indians forced to give up their land and move to the Indian Territory. While they had no family ties to Ireland, the Choctaw people understood firsthand the suffering endured by the Irish and wanted to help. 1 million Irish people died over the course of the potato famine, nearly 1/8 of the country's population. This is more people than currently live in such major U.S. cities as Boston, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C. Many Irish people fled their country to escape the famine, perhaps as many as 2 million. This led to a growth in the Irish populations of other countries, such as the United States.
Okay, and pause there. While I was researching this, I actually came across something really interesting and actually kind of nice. It's like a little heartwarming. So I want to see if, yeah. Boop.
Long heard how COVID-19 has hit communities of color especially hard, and that includes Native Americans. But help for one tribe is coming from an unlikely place far across the Atlantic. One nation is remembering a long ago act of kindness and is enthusiastically repaying the debt.
We'll keep watching, but I want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. What happened a long time ago, back in the 1800s? So if you don't know the history, we came to the United States, well, to America back then when it was just land. There were people already here, the Native Americans. We pretty much forced them out of their lands. We made some deals with them that were, not great, and then we kind of pushed them away to a far away territory for them to kind of take care of / inhabit. It's a little confusing and a little bad. But basically, what happened was a bunch of people died on the way there because we forced them out of their homes and we sent them to like just a spot on the map and said, "Here, this is where you guys are going to live." It's called the Trail of Tears. I hope that you guys talk about it in one of your history classes. Anyway, so that happened, and a little while after that, the Great Potato Famine happened in Ireland. So not too long after that, the Native Americans were so moved by what was happening in Ireland, like all these people were dying, and they felt like they had just kind of undergone the same thing. They felt such empathy that they mustered up all the money that they could, which back then was a lot. I think they said $100, but yeah, I'm sure even back then, 200 years ago was a lot of money. And they sent it off to Ireland. And apparently, because of this, the Irish and the Native Americans have had a nice relationship, which I didn't even know about. And so now we come to this, which again, very interesting. So, because of that kindness a couple hundred years ago, the Irish heard about what's happening in the United States with COVID, and especially what's happening to I think it was Choctaw Nation, that they reached out to help. 200 years later, it's crazy.
In Ireland, there's a special bond with Native Americans that has stood the test of time. It all happened 173 years ago during the potato famine. A million mostly poor Irish men and women starved to death when a fungus destroyed the potato crop. The Choctaw tribe in Oklahoma came to their aid. The tribe understood hardship. Many had died when 60,000 people were driven off their ancestral lands in what's known as the Trail of Tears.
They decided to reach in their pockets and send that money over to the people of Ireland.
In 1847, Gary Batten's ancestors came up with $170.
Today's money probably would be a little bit more than $5,000, but they said it was more than just the giving. It was the giving of hope. It was the giving that somebody cared for you in those desperate times.
Why do you think the Choctaw were so motivated to give when here in America they were dealt an awful blow themselves?
The short answer is empathy.
In Cork, Ireland, sculptor Alex Pentek created Kindred Spirits to commemorate the treasured gift. Gary Batten, now the Choctaw chief, was invited to be on.
I'm running out of time. But you get the point, right? It's really cool. So right now during COVID, it's really hitting these Indian territories really hard because they don't have the resources that some big cities have, right? So they set up a GoFundMe page, and it got the notice of one of these guys in Ireland, and he put together a big thing, and they raised, I think, like $5 million to support the Indian territories, and it was amazing, right? So this potato famine that happened a couple hundred years ago had an impact on what's happening today. Anyway, I thought that was really cool, so I wanted to share that real quick. But that's kind of out of scope for what we're talking about today. So let's get back to what it is that we're talking about. Oh, sorry, my camera's off. So there was a potato famine, and like you heard in the newscast, it was caused by a fungus, but specifically a fungus like protist. So it attacked the potatoes, and it really destroys the root system. So I showed you my potato the other day, and it had like all those roots, right? So what happens is these fungus start to grow on the roots, and it kind of kills the plant because the plant needs the roots to get water, right? So this is a fungus-like protist that caused this problem. Now, I think that I'm pretty much done talking about all this junk. But we're going to move on now to our virtual lab. So like I said, if we were in person, we would be doing this in in person. It'd be a lot more fun. What I used to do at the old school where I worked at, we would go to a pond and we would collect our own water. And when we did that, we would get to kind of explore what was in our own local biome. But because number one, we are virtual, we don't get to do that. So I want to put this link in the chat. This is where you're going to go so that we can start our virtual lab process. If you noticed on the assignment for today, there was a independent practice virtual pond. You're using that assignment to work through this. Now, when you click on that, what's going to happen is you're going to land, oh, sorry, wrong button. You're going to land on a page that looks similar to this. It's basically showing you like this person went out, they collected some pond water. What you're going to do is you're going to select the things that are in the pond water and then use that to fill out the worksheet. So I know it's not quite as fun as doing it yourself. If you have access to a microscope, then by all means, this would be an amazing project to kind of do just for fun. When I did it a couple years ago, we found some mosquito larvae. Like we couldn't figure out what it was because it looked bigger than all the other protists, and it turned out that it was a mosquito. It was pretty cool. Anyway, so if you have time and you have the resources, this is definitely something fun to do. In the event that we're able to go back to campus and I can figure out a way to get everybody to look at it without, spreading COVID everywhere, then we'll definitely do it just because I think it's super fun to kind of look at like when you look at water, like especially like a bottle of water, it doesn't look like anything, right? It just looks like clear liquid. But inside that liquid, there's sometimes a full, thriving, biodiverse population. It's really crazy to think about and even crazier to see. Sometimes if you're real lucky, you can see movement in the water, but it's very, very like hard to notice. So anyway, you've got your assignment. It's going to look like, it's going to say actually virtual pond dip, I think is what it's called. So this top thing is what it looks like. You're basically just identifying what's inside that cup. So I'm going to give you 15 minutes. If you want to work with other people, that's totally fine. Each person still has to turn one in. But I wanted it to be, if you wanted to collaborate with somebody and you can send private messages back and forth, I wanted to encourage that. If you don't want to, totally fine. You can do it on your own. I'm going to give you 15 minutes to work on it now in class. But if you don't finish, don't panic because you still have time to finish it later. But I definitely wanted to give you some time and the opportunity to collab with somebody if you wanted to. So again, actually, before I say it, can somebody come off mute and tell us what it is that we're about to do?
Yeah, I can tell you.
Go for it.
We're about to do our independent work for 15 minutes. Group under 4 allowed. Each person turn one in, or you can just work by yourself.
Thank you. I think I saw that some people weren't able to get the link, but hopefully the link works. If the link is working for you, please give me a thumbs up in the chat so I know that it's working for you. And Clint, it depends on the kind of water that you're drinking. If you're drinking like natural spring water, then yes. It's not filtered as much as something as distilled water. Distilled water is not going to have as much in it. So again, if you could, give me a thumbs up in the chat if the link is working for you. Thank you, Caleb. And I'll switch back to my thing.
And Mr. Raymond.
Uh-huh.
For this independent work, do we just press on any website like Pond Life identification or something?
Yes.
Okay.
And you're filling out the chart on the corresponding assignment. So make sure that you go to assignments. It'll be one of the assignments for today. One of them will be your CK through 12 reading. One of them will be this.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm putting 15 minutes on the clock. It might be a little bit short because I talked through some of the 15 minutes. So for sure, we got 10 minutes left. Thank you, Brighton.
Mr. Martinez.
Mm-hmm.
This is for a different assignment. This is for the homework. But for the homework, for the textbook, it says we can't open it because CK12 is down for maintenance. So,
Yeah, just try and do it later.
oh, okay. And also, I turned in the IP fungi assignment on time on Friday. So it's submitted. You have the assignment itself. I just forgot to click the word turn in. So will it be late?
No, in fact, I think I saw it earlier, so thank you, Casey.
Oh, you did? Thank you.
Sir,
Mm-hmm.
what does locomotion mean?
Like how it moves.
Okay.
So can I use the restroom?
Yeah, be quick. Okay, Grace, I'll share the assignment with you. So look for it in your chat.
Hey, Mr. Raymond.
Mm-hmm.
Are we supposed to be reading like all this?
Just what you need to complete the assignment. You shouldn't have to read everything.
Okay. But for the CK through 12, for homework, which one will be the simple guide?
So for tonight is 8.1.
8.1. Okay.
And Grace, I sent you the file over chat.
Sir,
Mm-hmm.
on the Spyro Gira, it doesn't say if it's auto or hetero.
Say the first part again, sorry.
So on one of the plans, sir, it says Spyro Gira.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. I'm looking at the thing and it doesn't say if it's auto or heterotroph.
I want to say that one is auto. If you want to, you can try looking on Google for it. It'll tell you the answer. I'll give you about 3 more minutes. Again, if you don't finish, that's fine. You'll have time to finish it later. While you're working on that, I wanted to talk about intervention a little bit. So, at the end of class today, you will be going to English as a part of our new intervention schedule. So what that means is we'll have different classes to go to instead of our regular den time. So what you're going to do is you're going to go from here to English.
Mr. Martinez, I'm so sorry. There was a change in the plan.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Tell me.
No, it's okay. They're going to go straight to their dens for cell time, and then I posted the plan on the GroupMe.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, so never mind. Disregard what I said. You're going to your regular advisory time. But it's still important to know that we are doing this new intervention schedule. So like I said, what that means is you're going to go, I guess, from your den now to your intervention period. It's going to give you more time to complete some work and to get more help on questions you may have. And maybe the teacher will have stuff to do with you guys during that time, because it really just depends on what's needed from either one of the teachers or the students. Okay, 1 more minute and then we will move on to our exit ticket. You might have noticed in the chat box, I'm going to do something a little bit different with our exit tickets. I enjoy getting the constant feedback, like getting your letters, but I want to make sure that we can just look at a chart real quick to see and gauge how we're doing. So what I've done is I've included a poll. The poll is not going to have a question attached to it. I'm going to put the question up here on your computer, and then you'll be able to put your response in the chat. Okay, a few more seconds. Like I said, it wasn't enough time to get the whole assignment done. I just really wanted to show you what it was, introduce Protists, and then be able to get you up and running so that you can do it later tonight at home. Between this and your CK through 12, it shouldn't take you too long. If you looked at the CK through 12, I think someone said it wasn't working. If you were able to see it, there's only like 3 or 4 questions. It's very, very short. And the reading itself is not very long either. So you'll have plenty of time to work on either your CK through 12 or this independent practice for tonight. Okay, so like I said, it's okay if you didn't finish. You'll have time. If not tonight, then for sure on Thursday, which is my intervention time. When it comes to labs, I'm not going to penalize you for being late because labs are definitely interactive. They take a little bit more time than normal things. So I still want you to prioritize getting your CK through 12 done. Not going to take too long, but your lab, I'm going to give you a little bit of leeway. And if you didn't hear me earlier, we do have an exam coming up on Friday. So we had a quiz last week. We're going to have an exam this week. So the exam is going to be covering classification, taxonomy, 3 domains, and the 6 kingdoms. So there will be information that you're learning this week that will be on the test on Friday. Because you downloaded your CK through 12 schedule because you were smart, you can go ahead and read ahead of where we are right now in class to prepare. If you want to just wait around, that's totally fine, but know that we're not going to finish our material until Wednesday. So today, tomorrow, and then Wednesday is all new material. Thursday, we'll have a general review, and then our exam will be on Friday. So I'll remind you the rest of the week, just to make sure that you're getting ready for it. But we will have a review on Thursday. Okay, let's get to the exit ticket, because I think this is going to be interesting. So, like I said, we're going to do star questions. We're not going to break this one down because I don't think we have time to do that. But what I want is for you to put your answer into that form. Well, I guess it's a multiple choice. So you're going to click your answer choice, and then we're going to gauge to see how we're all doing. We've got about 60 people here, so I'm going to expect to see 60 responses, maybe a little bit less. But what I'm looking for is to see where we all are with this information. So I didn't include a timer because I wasn't sure how this was going to work. But you see, a student used a microscope to study 4 members of the phylum Celiophora. Members of this phylum move when propelled by hundreds of tiny cilia. Although these organisms belong to the same phylum, they are classified as different blank. So again, you're putting your answer into that little poll, and then we're going to look at our answers here in a second. You'll click A, B, C, or D, and then you'll click Submit Vote.
Mr. Martinez,
Mm-hmm.
what is locomotion and what is mixotrophic?
Mixotrophic means both heterotrophic and autotrophic, so it just means they do both. And your other one, locomotion, means to move. So like in the old days, they would call trains locomotives. Locomotion just means like how they move.
So it's just, oh, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Does everybody see the form in the chat box? Because I've only gotten one response, I think, so far. Oh, okay. It might be because I noticed as I was going through classes today that my Teams was being very slow. So it could also just be that. Oh, actually, while you're doing this, I had one more thing. So on your quiz on Friday, so I made a mistake. Some of y'all are not signed in with your IDEA accounts. So I was able to get like 30 or so responses from people, but then I had a whole bunch of other responses that had no names associated with the account. So it just said like participant. So like participant 1, participant 2, whatever. So for a whole bunch of people, I couldn't get a score for it. So I decided we're just going to take that as a practice. So I'm not going to take a grade for the quiz from last week. So think of that as just being practice. We will have weekly quizzes in the event that, except for when we have, tests. So we have tests this Friday, so there's no quiz this week. But expect to have weekly quizzes over CK through 12. It'll be just like it happened last time, but this time I'll be smarter. I'm going to include a question that asks for your name. That way we can avoid that problem again. I think because it's not submitting, people are going to put their answer in the chat box. That's fine. Like I said, this was just an experiment to kind of see how that worked. Seeing a lot of Bs, very good. So as you can see, Paramecium aurelia, Paramecium caudatum, Paramecium bursaria, Paramecium multimicronucleatum. These are all different species. The Paramecium would be the genus name, whereas the species name is going to be different because they're all a little bit different. So very good. Species was the answer. And now we got one more. Which list correctly identifies characteristics that protists share with animals? So I'm not going to put a form up for this one. I just wanted to try it out. It didn't work. So just go ahead and put your answer in the chat box like normal. F, G, H, or J. Which list correctly identifies characteristics that protists share with animals? So remember that protists and animals are different kingdoms, but they share similar characteristics. So far we've got G, B. Remember, use F, G, H, J because I don't know which one B is. Well, I guess I don't know if we think of B as being the same, I guess is the better way of putting it. So I'm seeing G's. G says motile, which means it can move, multicellular, which means it's more than one cell, and photosynthetic. So it's important to remember that animals are not photosynthetic, right? Plants are photosynthetic. We cannot make our own food. It'd be nice if we could, but we'd all be fat and it'd be like a Wally world, right? So we're not photosynthetic. We are heterotrophic. We have to eat our own food. So if we were breaking down this question, you should eliminate right off the bat F and G because both of those mentioned photosynthesis. As animals, we do not photosynthesize. Protists do, we don't. So right off the bat, you should get rid of F and G. Like I said, it's important to work through these answer choices because sometimes you can get tricked up like that. Now I'm seeing lots of J's, one H. Second important thing when working through your answer choices is to get rid of things that are not going to be the answer. Both protists and animals are going to be eukaryotic, not prokaryotic. So that would also eliminate J as being the right answer. So Clint, congratulations, you got it right. Damien got it right, good job. Hugo, very good. Ayla. So protists and animals are both eukaryotes. They are both motile. They both reproduce sexually. They are, however, not prokaryotic. Neither protists nor animals are prokaryotes. So again, you should have eliminated F, G, and J almost immediately, leaving H as the only possible answer choice. Okay. Wonderful work today, guys. Sorry it was really, really fast and furious. Like there was just so much to get through, and I want to make sure that I cover everything so that we have time for a review on Thursday. Like Ms. Kentu said earlier, I was wrong. You are headed to your den time. We're going to have our SEL lessons, and then from there we will go to English for our intervention period. So again, we're headed to our dens, then we're going to go to English. Thank you guys for your participation today. Thank you for putting up with me and my tech issues. Y'all did great. Thank you so much. Take a few minutes, take a break, stand up, do some jumping jacks. I think I saw someone earlier said that they drank a whole bunch of coffee, so go do some push-ups or something to get rid of that energy. We're headed to our SEL and then intervention, and then you're done. Bye, Clint. I'll see you later. See you in a few minutes. I'm really excited to show you guys the potato plant. It's been growing in the last couple of days. I had to make holes because it was growing so far out of the carton. So we'll look at that hopefully later this week. I know that between the potato plant, talking about the potato famine, and just being a general potato fan, I hope that I don't become like a potato teacher. Bye, Miguel. Bye, Josiah. I'll see y'all later. I'll go ahead and stop the recording. And like I said, thank you guys. You did great today.